pattern that I'm going to tie. I always, the first time this was introduced to me, I looked at it and I said, geez, it looks like a fly a friggin' 4-year-old tied. It was a bastardized woolly bugger, or a woolly bugger that the guy didn't have the right material for. And this customer that I was with, I've been guiding him for about 20 years, and he bought a bunch of them from this guy in Pennsylvania. His name is Harry Murray, and Harry is he's one of those sort of quiet. He's not like Dave Whitlock or Doug Swisher, those guys that really popularized a lot of patterns. But Murray spent a lot of time looking at observing smallmouth bass, and one of his determinations was the Hellgrammite is a hugely important part of their diet. And he went through dozens, if you read the story, he went through dozens of different patterns before he stumbled onto this one, and I'm sure he put a fair amount of science in it too, watching them swim and how they looked in the water. And this Murray's Hellgrammite is an ugly fly, but it is deadly effective. Okay, so I'm using an oversized black dumbbell eye here. I usually use just the garden variety gray ones, but they don't have eyes, so to speak. This is all for weight, but it is bigger than I would normally put on this size hook. But the reason is we want this fly to get down quickly and swim like a clouser, so it's gonna turn upright once it's in the water. And I'm going to secure this like I always do with half a dozen wraps around, just figurating it. And now I can orient it on the top of the hook and make sure it's straight. Now I'll do some, I'm coming in and under or behind just to help lock it in, and I'll do that a number of times, and that really locks the barbells in place. And this is just a mustad stinger hook, which is a fly that I like for a hook that I like for the majority of my bass stuff. You can I tie dry flies on it, deer hair poppers, regular poppers, but it's got a nice wide gap or gape, even for the poppers that do have the tendency to cover up the gap, but it's just the stinger hook. Murray ties his on longer hooks. Like he'll generally use a standard streamer hook, and that's what I was originally using. I just find that makes it a little too long, and I want the ass end of it to be a little more animated. So the tail on this you're going to see is disproportionately long. You see, I'm using a fair amount. I think I'm even going to take more than that. A fairly substantial clump of this ostrich hurl. I'm not going to pull that off. I'm going to cut it off because I don't know if it'll come off evenly. And this is going to be the tail. So this fly is basically a woolly bugger, a weighted woolly bugger with ostrich hurl. I'm going to take that, set that just inside the eyes so that I can use that to build up the mass.
What do you say to hook? What was the hook again? Hook. It's a sprout hook. No.
Stinger.
Stinger hook. Yeah.
Yeah. So a woolly bugger, we would normally cut it off around the same length as the hook. I'm going to take this a little bit longer. As I say, it's a little bit disproportionately long, and cut it off. And that's your tail. This is why I say it looked like a Looks like a fly that a 5-year-old tied. I'm going to use a dubbing loop here to tie in the body, and in this case I'm using ostrich herl again. The original pattern was tied with just black chenille. And I've certainly done that. I like to keep my materials down to a minimum. So I'm going to come back, and all I'm doing here is just building a core for my body. Set that aside. Longest. Tie that in with so that the natural curve is going to the rear, and then tie it down. I know I've mentioned this before, but when you're tying in natural materials, always make those first couple of turns fairly loose until you get 4 or 5 turns in them. Then you can start putting some torque on it. If you're using like this chunk of ostrich herl is probably older than I am, so it will get a little brittle. So if you torque right down on it right off the hop, it does have it can have the tendency to break. So now I'm just going to take I'll use this. I've got my loop, my dubbing loop, which is not going to serve as a dubbing loop. All it's serving is as a strengthener for the hackle, or sorry, for the body. It just makes a cord, and then I'll start wrapping that to make a chenille. And this pattern, Harry tied this in a number of different colors. I think he had an olive one at one point, and a brown or a tan. The black is the one that performs. The tan does not perform nearly as well. I don't even tie it anymore. I don't even bother with it because this one works so much better. The other thing with the ostrich herl is you get a little more animation with it. It just those little it's not as I guess mechanical as the chenille. It just everything moves a little bit more.
Stop making cotton chenilles.
And I'm going to take that right in behind the eyes and secure it. And then we're going to wrap our hackle. And I want these hackles to be fairly close. And I'm using a fairly narrow hackle here because all this is doing is representing the big sort of spiny legs that run along the side of the Hellgrammite. It's not going in the right direction, but I'm not worried about that. So I would normally, if I was tying a woolly bugger, I would open these up a little bit, but I'm going to keep these fairly close. I'll open it up a little bit as I get to the front, but and this fly works equally well like stripped on a sink tip or bottom bounced, finesse fished on just a long leader. Just sort of, especially if you can spot fish, just kind of bounce it into them. Get rid of that. So now I'm going to bring the thread to the front. And I'm going to tie in a couple of, these are just rubber legs, but they act as sort of a pincer. And I'll wrap one there. You can put this in one piece and fold it over if you want. I just went like this. Get those roughly the same length. And I want those coming out. That's perfect. I want those just to be sort of splayed out of the front like that. Sometimes it works out good, sometimes it doesn't, but that actually worked out pretty good. And again, the rubber legs, although they do represent those big nasty pincers on a Hellgrammite, they also provide a little bit of movement. Now I'm going to come back in behind the eyes again, and I'm going to make another core. Because I'm going to use a little bit more of the chenille. And on a fly this size, generally I'll use 4 or 5 pieces, anticipating that one will break.
You said that's ostrich, Rob?
Yeah. Dummy, I took that up prematurely.
So I'm not familiar with these terms that you use, Rob. Like, is this like a dragonfly?
The Hellgrammite? The Hellgrammite is the nymph of the Dobson fly.
Oh,
And the Dobson fly, if you're not familiar with it, it's those, they're 1 year nymph, but they're big, aggressive. They'll actually pinch you with those pincers.
They were this big.
They're mean looking. I'm
Yeah, I remember seeing one
I'm a bug
in all
guy,
these
but I
years,
don't like
though.
those
I mean, I've
bastards.
only ever seen one. Wow.
When they fly, you can hear them. They're like, like they're making noise.
Like a cicada?
Sort of. Yeah? They're making like a buzzing noise. Like
So,
a leaf. Like a leaf.
So,
Up
Yeah.
in the air.
right. So this would be at night, or?
mostly at night.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I saw it in the afternoon, yeah.
Right.
But
Wow.
all those nymphs that are in there.
Sorry, Rob.
So I've
Yeah.
done the same thing, just cut everything inside that core, and again, that core just acts as a security. And I'm gonna come once behind, and I'm gonna make a series of figure eights
Pikes. Pikes.
around there.
Oh, pike like them? Really?
I was full of those.
Wow.
Almost looks like you.
So they obviously don't have.
I didn't expect.
One, exactly.
Had at least 10 of them.
Try not to cut those off this time, Ed. But this pattern can also be tied without the eyes, and I always keep a few of those around because sometimes you don't want that weight. I've tied them with the eyes, without the eyes, and I've tied them with one wrap of lead around the body to give it a more uniform weight, or maybe a little bit of lead at the front, just depending on the water. If I cast this into still water, it's going to sink like a meteor. and get down very quick. Fortunately, it'll generally ride upright like that. But that's
Wow.
that's Murray's Hellgrammite.